Hello and welcome to our webinar, Redesign Smarter, Make Your Next Hospital Website Your Best. I'm David Sturtz, Digital Strategy Director here at Geonetric, and your host for today's webinar. We know that the web is never finished, and healthcare is a rapidly growing and changing industry. Whether the motivation for your redesign is adapting to the latest technology and design trends, or redefining how you present your brand and tell your organization's story, a website overhaul is probably in your future, in your recent past, or both. Today, we're going to have a conversation about redesigning websites, and I have a couple of folks with me to help you get a sense of what's involved and to share some tips and tricks to consider during your next website redesign. The first of our guests today is Dale Vanover, a marketing specialist at Owensboro Health. At Owensboro, Dale manages the organization's digital branding efforts, including managing the website and social media outlets. Dale has more than 15 years of experience in digital marketing, journalism, and videography. He holds a Bachelor's of Science in Radio and Television Production with a minor in advertising from Murray State University. Welcome, Dale.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I've also got Erin Schroeder, content strategist, here with me. And Erin's an engaging writer. She's an experienced teacher, and she's also a talented interviewer with a decade of reporting under her belt, and she has the perfect skill set for being a content strategist. She holds a bachelor's degree in journalism from St. Ambrose University, master's degree in professional journalism from University of Iowa, and certifications in teaching and copywriting. So I'm going to start off, and we're going to kind of have a Q&A today, just walking through a lot of thoughts behind the process. I'm going to start off asking Erin, you work with a lot of clients as they're going through the redesign process early and upfront. What are some of the things that you see as people are engaging with this process? What are the motivators that are getting them started on a redesign?
I think a lot of people are really engaged with the redesign process because of the responsive and the need for that rising mobile audience. We know that about 62% of U.S. adults actually own smartphones and operate them daily, and about 19% of those adults also use those smartphones as their primary access to the web. So we know that there's a huge growing mobile audience for a lot of our clients. And it's not just so much about having a mobile website anymore. It's about having a responsive site that works on different devices. As tablets continue to be more popular, obviously smartphones are becoming more and more popular over the basic phones. People really want to be able to access that information quickly and easily on any device that they're on at their convenience.
Dale, I know at Owensboro Health, a lot of the reason that you came on board was because of the redesign that was already planned. What was it like for you starting out with that major project ahead of you?
Well, it was exciting for me because I had been on the sales end of digital for many years. And so in my interview process, it was laid up front for me that a big expectation of my candidacy would be to spearhead the project management of the website design. Fortunately for me, my interview process took 2 months, and so I had plenty of time to do research because I was new to the healthcare industry. And I tell you, what I found out there was a lot of attention had not been given to a lot of healthcare websites. So I knew, given my creative background, that I had a clean slate to do something really, really cool with Owensboro Health. Yeah,
it sounds like you saw a big opportunity to really bring a lot of design trends. And I know one of the things that you were considering was moving towards responsive design and embracing that mobile audience. How did the change in technology and that user behavior really create a case for you with your leadership?
Well, it was a necessity. With my sales background with selling digital, I had a good spiel about, how important mobile was. Everything was going to mobile. And when you ask someone, when could they tell you the last time that they had their mobile device 5 feet away from them, they kind of laugh because they realize that they're connected, to their phones. So, what we did for leadership is presenting our plan for the redesign was actually take our analytics from 2014 and actually show them that 43% of the traffic to the site in 2014 was actually from a mobile device. And when you showed them that our users were having to stretch and pinch and really kind of maneuver the web pages instead of it being responsive, it got their attention rather quickly.
Yeah, having that data to back up some of those feelings that you have about why you need to redesign can be really helpful. Can really help to set those goals overall as well. And Erin, what are some of the things that you see early on as far as goal setting that maybe lead to a more successful project and make sure that people come out the other end with what they wanted.
Yeah, I think Dale hit it on the head. A lot of it is having conversations early with some of those leaders in your organization and those primary stakeholders, and setting expectations. A redesign, in a marketing sense, makes a lot of sense to people who work on that team or work with the web daily. But I think for stakeholders or people who are more disconnected from that piece of the organization, they don't really know what that entails and what that redesign means and where it could go in the future. And so having those discussions with stakeholders is a huge, huge step in the right direction. But also thinking about your internal team and making sure, and we'll talk about this later, talking about identifying resources on your team, making sure you have asked about important questions and answered important questions that you can answer, your stakeholders can answer, so you all have a pretty good understanding about what this project is going to do and how fast it's going to go and the scope and et cetera. So thinking about some of those questions, these are some questions that on the implementation team, we really like to ask people to start thinking about early in the project. So thinking about who is going to be responsible for executing that project, and what are you really trying to accomplish with the redesign? Where are you going to get those tasks and approvals? Why do you want to do a redesign at all? And how are you going to define the success of this project? So those, it's kind of that who, what, when, where, why, how is a really great way to think about setting some of those goals, answering some of those really important questions that will help define the foundation of the project.
Back to your journalism skills there.
Yep.
So you have a nice way of kind of summing all this up here with having that core strategy. Can you kind of walk through what that looks like?
Sure. So this is actually, we use this a lot in content strategy, and this is from Brain Traffic, which is a great organization that does a lot of content strategy work. But I think there's a lot of pieces to this that work well in talking about a redesign project. So you have substance and structure. So you're thinking about, your CMS is substance, your content is structure and substance, the things that can really be defined by a physical object. But on the other side, you have to think about your team and that workflow and the governance and who owns the different pieces of the responsibilities and how are those things going to get accomplished and what are those deadlines. Those aren't really quite as tangible as the CMS itself or the content or the words on the page. So those things really have to come together to make sure that the team understands or the individuals involved understand what the process is and how we can make it as seamless as possible.
Cool. So at this stage of the process, a lot of organizations are realizing maybe they don't have access to all the resources that they need, whether that's technical, whether that's more strategic or consulting sort of thought process, and they start looking for a partner. And so we just wanted to briefly touch on, what's involved in finding a partner, and what do you see, Erin, you're often involved with, again, folks early in this stage that have just selected a partner. What was motivating them to do that? And
I think a lot of people are looking for partners that have other resources available. So obviously with Geonetric, one of our big differentiators from others is that we are healthcare specific. So you're getting a group of people that knows healthcare inside and out. We know what the latest trends are. But aside from that, even outside vendors that you work with, thinking about, are they a good cultural fit for your organization? Does this vendor offer other digital services? Can you get more than one thing under one roof? We know that the love of the big box store is because everything is so convenient, and it can kind of work that way with vendors too. If you can find people that can offer services that you need to help you achieve your redesign goals, it really takes a lot of pressure off your back. And also thinking about, how has this vendor worked with other clients like us? So, we like to encourage potential clients to go out and call vendor portfolio clients to find out their expectations and look at their experiences and ask follow-up questions. But I think for a lot of folks who are partnering, and I know working on implementation and folks working with Geonetric, they're coming to us because there's other specialties we can offer them. So we can help them with migration, and we can do content strategy. And if they purchase content writing, we can do development for them as well. So I think thinking about some of those really high-level needs, what does your internal team have that you can support, and what doesn't it have that your vendor can help support?
Absolutely. So, Dale, along those lines, I know throughout this process, there's a real collaborative sort of work style that you went through with the team. We've got some clients that really prefer the big reveal and others that really like more of that collaboration. What did that look like for you, and how do you think that impacted the project?
Our biggest champion here, I would say, is our director, Barbara Taylor. She, being new to the department, she really helped me understand the approval process throughout the organization. And so with her guidance, we started from managers and directors and then went all the way up to administration. And what I mean by that is we held 3 stakeholder calls with high-level directors throughout the organization, and then from there we sent out over 100 surveys to the rest of the managers and directors of the organization. And then with Aaron's help and Geonetric, we condensed all of that information down to what our organization as a whole was looking for in a new website. And it basically boiled down to cleaner content and better navigation. And we took that information in turn and presented it to the organization's administration team and said, we have talked to over 80 people or heard feedback from over 80 people, and this is what they are saying they want in a web design or redesign. And we presented what we had and went from there.
Yeah, I think that process of gathering that information from the stakeholders and really engaging people early on, Aaron, I think we see that working in 2 ways. One, you get the information you need to set those goals, set the priority for the project, but you're also starting to get people on board.
Absolutely. You're starting conversations, and that's a huge piece of this. And sometimes you're starting conversations with folks in your organization that maybe you've never talked to before. So it's a really great way not only to build relationships with people inside your organization, but obviously to get a lot of support from people for the redesign and get them kind of jazzed about the redesign too, because the reveal is always a great part of this, and we'll talk about that later as well.
Yeah, so thinking about these people that you're getting support from internally, your team, Aaron, has a phrase, knowing your heroes. What does that mean, and how does that fit into this process?
It's a little bit of both, and we like to call them heroes because I think the project doesn't work without people doing the project, of course. So part of that is your stakeholders, identifying who those people are, who are those top-level approvers that really need to sign off and give their okay on phases of the website, and whether that be content or design or other major milestones. But it's also identifying your internal crew, finding that tribe of people who's going to rally around you and help you get to where you need to go. So thinking about what roles you have available at your disposal, whether you work next to them or whether they work down the hall. Do you have content writers on staff, or do you have web designers, folks who know HTML and coding? Do you have website coordinators or social media specialists who help do social media and sharing? So thinking about some of those folks who can really be an asset on the website. The web is a very pinpointed specialty, so you want to make sure you have the right people in your corner.
Well, I think you talked as well about making sure they've got enough time. So you may think you have all the people there, but if they're doing other things. Right,
yeah, obviously. And Dale can speak to this too from his end. He was kind of a one-man band really going forward with this project for Owensboro Health. But you really want to think about how much time can be dedicated. And you're putting that team together. If someone's only there 10% of the time, how much value are they really going to bring to this project, especially when times get tough and deadlines have to be met, and things are moving very fast. So thinking about, especially with content, that seems to be the biggest hurdle for a lot of clients, is who's going to help migrate and improve that content. If we need content written, do we have someone identified who can do that? So, and aside from that, going back to that vendor partnership, can the vendor provide those resources if you cannot? So if you have a social media person that can help kind of start amping up a pre-launch promotion, how much time can they really devote to that? So identifying those resources early is helpful. Of course, things pop up during the project and you can account for those people's absence if needed. But I think really understanding who you have to work with is a really big piece of making sure that this project is successful.
So Dale, what did that look like for you? Who are your heroes internally? I know, like Aaron mentioned, you were driving a large part of this project yourself. Where else were you getting help from?
Really, my geometric team. they helped a lot, but at the same time, too, on the back end, support from our director and my direct manager, and then also, too, our president and CEO. He was very hands-on, was very interested in knowing what we had available and where we were going with the site, and willing to listen. And then beyond that, too, the entire leadership team. Once you get buy-in from your administration team and present to managers and directors and get them jazzed about something that they had input on, really the whole organization as a whole came together to support it on very many levels beyond the stakeholders' calls.
Yeah, it sounds like you were able to get a lot of good support going on and really move things forward because of that.
Yes.
As you were kind of digging into the process, Dale, did you do anything to kind of get your internal team up to speed or get yourself up to speed with the process, with the content processes or the systems?
Well, it goes back to having a really good, strong relationship, or building a good, strong relationship with my account manager at Genetric, Ashley, and the redesign team, Penny, who was the project manager on there. They really laid out the groundwork for me to understand how the process was going to be, and gave me the direction I needed to clearly give that information on to my managers and supervisors, so everyone at any time when they had a question on where we were with the redesign, I was able to answer that question. So a big thing in our organization is, have the answers when the questions are asked, and with the project management team for the redesign, I had those answers.
Yeah, absolutely. Being able to answer those questions internally, I know, can help really boost the confidence in the project that things really are on track. This is reality. This is actually happening. That's great. Aaron, you talked to me before about getting people up to speed. I know a piece of what your team does is really training even folks that have been are not maybe doing a replatforming as part of a redesign, getting them up to speed on the content management system that they're using, just the whole process that people will be going through. Where do you see some of the learning curves happening?
I think, well, let's start with the first one, which is going to a new platform. Obviously, your big constraint is going to be training and learning that platform. And that's where, if you're working with a vendor that offers a platform, or it's the vendor's software that you're starting to use, partnering with them is really important, and that can be a great conversation as well, because you get to learn all the ins and outs from the folks who developed it, which is a huge piece of the success too. But I think a lot of it too has to do with, if you have 3 people on your team that's heads down on the redesign, making sure that you're all aligning your roles and responsibilities, and you understand who's responsible for what. And Dale just mentioned it's really helpful to have answers to questions when they come up, and I think identifying those responsibilities is really important as well. If you're new to an organization, though, too, thinking about familiarizing yourself with new style guides or branding initiatives, making sure that you're familiar and comfortable with the organization so you can accurately represent it to the vendor as you're working through the project. So, and then last, of course, making sure that you have an approval process in place. If there's people that need to have a sign-off on the launch or on the design itself or on content, making sure that you have those people in place. Hopefully now no big vacations or leaves of absences are in the way of that, but making sure that they're there so you can really get that process started and keep that ball rolling in the right direction.
Well, so the impulse, I think, at this phase is you've kind of got the team in place. Let's start running and just start doing stuff. And you brought along this chart here that kind of lays out all the pieces. Can you talk to us about what is this telling us?
It's a little overwhelming, but this is what we call on our implementation team our bubble chart. And this is a very, very high-level view of some of those milestone processes that take place during a redesign project or an implementation project. So, we start with a lot of discovery. We really get to know the client, try to find out, make sure we understand what some of those high-level needs are for the phase 1 of the launch, which we'll talk about shortly. Talking about functionality, talking about, in this case, their provider import, what they want their directories to look like, and then moving into content strategy, which is my bread and butter, talking to stakeholders, looking at the content, auditing, do we have a lot of fat we can trim? Talking about writing for the web and creating a navigation that works really well for those target users. And that always, of course, moves into design and development. So that's the fun part. Everyone loves seeing the new design, making it look really nice, but that's where we start building those responsive templates, making sure and doing a lot of testing to make sure that those templates work on all devices. And then toward the end of the project, we're really going toward launch. So thinking about how you want to roll that out internally and externally and bring a lot of traffic into that new, beautiful website that you've created.
So rather than jumping right in, starting to move things around and rewrite, really starting at that beginning part with some research. And what are some of the areas that you see that people need to focus on when they're researching? How can they do that?
I think for us, I know on our side, a lot of it is stakeholders, so giving us access to some of those folks in your organization who can help us. But also, there's things we can do and that the clients can do on their end. So on the screen right now, we have a couple of examples. Dale, I think you probably remember this. We did some heat mapping on Owensboro Health previous website to kind of see where people were going. So we had a lot of different navigation elements, some that we weren't sure how really they were working. And so the heat mapping really gave us an opportunity to say, wow, a lot of people are using site search. That could be a clue that maybe they can't find what they're looking for. It could just mean we have a lot of people that like to use site search. So it kind of just gives us a few assumptions that we can make to improve that navigation. And likewise, Mid-Michigan Health, who also went through a redesign recently, they actually put a survey on their site. They wanted to find out from the users themselves, what is their experience like with their website? And that helps give us and them a little bit more insight into what's working and what's not, so we can start making some changes for the better.
Sure. Dale, you mentioned, analytics helping to drive that decision to move responsive. Were there other things that your web analytics and some of the usability testing helped to figure out for you as far as navigation or other aspects of your redesign?
I loved the heat mapping. It was just such a cool thing to see what people were actually using beyond Google Analytics and how they were interacting with the web page. But really, it was going by Google Analytics, using the heat mapping, and then also to the content recommendation from Erin and her team on what we should move forward with. We wanted to make it user-friendly, and we wanted, as part of the design, have icons. And so I questioned up front, what are people coming to this website to do? What are they wanting to accomplish when they come? And we keyed in on 6 factors that kept repeating over and over and over. People were coming to look at baby pictures. They were coming to find a job. They were wanting to get on my chart. So I wanted to make that up front, where people did not have to look for those things, and put it in a visualization that they see on their mobile phones and get them used to, things that they're seeing in other places. So really, the Google Analytics, the heat mapping, and then the suggestions from Erin and her team on what that task navigation should look like.
Yeah, it all really ties together to see what people are trying to do and matching it up there. I know, Erin, we talk a lot of times about the content being a huge struggle within a web project. What are some of the big things from a content perspective that you think are some of those early decisions that really drive the overall scope?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So your web content is really your library, and like libraries, some of those books can get a little dusty. You have collections of information, some which you maybe had for years and years, and you really want to take a good hard look at that as you start piecing your site together, thinking about what sections of content haven't been touched in a while. And sometimes you can just look at the page and know it. Sometimes there's a timestamp and it'll tell you right away when it was last updated. But sometimes it's just a matter of saying, wow, I know we don't offer this anymore. So thinking about auditing your content for what we call rot, which is a very gross term, but it's meant to be. You really want to think about content that's redundant. One of the great things about moving to a new platform is you do kind of get to do some spring cleaning and move out some of that old stuff. But what's great about the web is that there's so many opportunities to cross-link content. So you don't really have to worry about creating the same content in 1 or 2 places when you can cross-link it and tell the same story. Also looking for content that's outdated. Making sure that you don't have things that have been sitting there. Maybe you had a new hospital that was built 4 or 5 years ago. It might be time to take down some of those updates on the construction. Probably not as necessary today. And that really cleans out some of that inventory as well. And it gives Google more to look at in the fresher content that you've created. And then last would be trivial. So making sure that all the content on your site has meaning and purpose, especially with your target audience. If it doesn't have a purpose, it doesn't really need to live on your site. And so making sure that you're always keeping your target audiences in mind, whether that be patients or donors or, visitors and families, whomever you're trying to target your site to, make sure that all that content has a very solid purpose. And one of the interesting things we found too, with some Pew Research Center studies, is that clinicians are actually a great central resource for information and support. And we find that a lot of users actually don't use the web to answer all their questions about their health problems. They actually take that conversation mostly offline and talk to their healthcare provider for those to really dig down and learn more about their condition, about treatment or at-home care. So while you really think your website should answer every possible question your patients have, it really doesn't have to, and a lot of that content doesn't get clicked on as often as you'd think. So making sure that content really is a gateway to your organization and the quality of care you offer, rather than trying to answer every question they could possibly have.
Yeah. So as you're going through that process, you're identifying rot and trying to trim things down. Where do you end up with that? How do you kind of communicate that back? What does that look
What
like?
that ends up coming into is what we call it at Geometric a content matrix. And it's kind of also known as a detailed sitemap. There's a lot of different terms for it. But a matrix is really this fantastic document that takes the pages of your content inventory, so all the pages of your current site, sorted into a new navigation with parent-child relationships. So where you might have had 6 or 7 pages under heart, maybe that content matrix now recommends 3 or 4 that are more targeted and more aptly identified or aptly labeled, so they're easier to navigate and find for users. And they also come with recommendations to improve and streamline that content. So how can you make that a little bit better? And that's what's really great. This document can give you a lot of insight, and it's really your blueprint to creating that sitemap and building those pages in your CMS. But we really like to use this, and I know, Dale, this was a big piece of your project as well. And when you work with a content writer or content development, this matrix can really be their backbone to what they're doing and what they're creating.
It becomes kind of a project plan almost for the content part of the effort. Dale, I think you described it to me as the content part of your project as cutting the fat. And what did that mean to you? Why was that important?
Sure. I tell you, our old website, Rod, describes it perfectly in the sense that we had built a new hospital in 2013, and if you went to the old website, I mean, it was dedicated a shrine to the new hospital. 2 years later, we were still using the word new on everything with the hospital. But also, too, they were in a culture where every service line thought that they needed a microsite or a landing page. And so you had all of these pages with links that would go to a page with one paragraph on them. So it made no sense to me as why we had all these little separate landing pages. And so really what I envisioned was getting rid of this wasteland, if you will, and really making this a health system website. And, you have to have some tender conversations with people when you tell them that, they're not going to have a landing page anymore, but they're going to have a section dedicated to their service line, and it's only going to be 2 pages because all of those 15 pages they had with one paragraph on them now can fit on 2. And so that's what I mean by trimming the fat. We had a lot of stuff. Users would get turned around and linking to so many different places. It really wasn't functional for someone, and especially if it wasn't mobily optimized or responsive, you could get lost in our site very quickly.
Yeah. After having had some of those tender conversations and kind of made it out the other side, did you see, was that successful? Did you feel any kind of backlash after the site launch? I know that's probably a concern for people going into this process.
Actually, not at all. It actually opened the door to larger conversations and saying, okay, what we have found is this content's really out of date. We don't offer a lot of these services anymore. That doctor doesn't work here anymore. That phone number doesn't work anymore. This is not our address. And so we were able to actually expand our services with Geometric and talk to them about writing and updating our content for our major service lines. And from there, we did an initial kickoff. It was so successful, we extended it. And that was so successful that we're actually getting 2 more contracts for 2 more of our larger locations as we can continue to grow. But I still have those tender conversations. I had to tell someone last week that just because pediatrics now offers walk-in hours, it doesn't get its own page. We're going to incorporate that on the landing page for pediatrics. So.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's an ongoing process of keeping that contained. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So we typically are using content, I think, to derive a lot of structure within the site. And that's kind of where we start moving into, once we've got some of that structure, we start thinking about design. And Dale, you were really thinking about this. It sounds like even before you were hired for the job, you started thinking about the design approach that you might take for the new site. What were some of the things you discovered in your research?
Well, really, there wasn't, to me, it was healthcare websites weren't cool. They weren't sexy. There was nothing that, they actually looked really old and outdated. And so, even looking at, we have 4 major health systems within our tri-state area, and looking at all of the websites, it looked like someone's nephew had done them on WordPress. And so really I was able to get my head around what is cool and new by actually going to the symposium that Geometric holds, and they talked about all the new designs trends out there. the video header, getting rid of 3D buttons, and it's now flat panels, and really just taking all those different elements and saying, hey, I want something that the other guys aren't using, and really pushing the envelope to see what was available to us. And then, as you've mentioned, brand compass, using our brand compass to mask those really cool, edgier designs and say, okay, this is what Owensboro Health looks like now.
Yeah, definitely. Taking all of those trends and really owning them, making them fit with that brand is a key piece of that. And overall, we always say that the design process is so subjective. I know the first comp you got back in this process maybe didn't quite hit the mark. And
no, it didn't.
The process looked like. Yeah. So I think that's an important thing for people to hear is that, you're not going to get it right the first time. And
yeah.
What did the process look like for you in responding to that and getting it to a place that you fell in love with it?
That was a tender conversation too, because I got the design back and I wasn't wowed. And in my head, I was thinking, okay, this looks like we're selling insurance. And I felt a little relief when I presented it to my manager and director, because they didn't say insurance, but they kind of felt me, it didn't wow them. And so I hated to go back and tell the designer saying, okay, this isn't going to work, but at the same time, too, communication to me is key. And so I was able to literally have a sit-down conversation on the phone saying, okay, this kind of isn't where we want to go. And we hashed out every element on that design that he had sent. And the next thing that I know, he was sending back a design that just wowed us. So really just communicating exactly, what I had in my head, and it's a scary place to be sometimes, but, they're not in there. They don't see what I see. And so what I'll say about Brian is that he really, really listened and really delivered on, the design we were going for.
Yeah, I think it comes back to knowing that team and knowing that everybody can't be inside your head at all times, right?
Exactly.
Have those conversations. Oh. So you had some early stakeholder involvement and a lot of buy-in off the bat. As you were getting that design back, those design comps, what did that process look like? Was that something you were taking back to your leadership team and continuing to get buy-in on?
Well, we only had two. We had the original that didn't fly past my director or manager, and then we got the second one, and we're like, okay, this is it. And so we played around with it and, kind of changed this panel, that panel. Getting the video header into place was just phenomenal and just was a game changer. But, we faced an uphill battle with that, too, because we were a little outside the box with having a blue background instead of, colors. And, why is it blue? Well, that's because that's our brand, So we were able to have those answers to those questions and things, but it really came together, and we had an explanation of why we chose what we chose when we presented it, and it was very, very well received.
Yeah, it sounds like you really made the case for each and every design element needing to be there and having reasons behind that. We just pulled up the logo.
Yeah, from the colors at the very top all the way down to the very bottom, we discussed, and I let them know why we chose that. Those were our brand colors. You'll see it throughout the entire site, all the way down to our footer. And, our logo says Owensboro Health. This is our health systems website. It's not about the hospital anymore. It's about our entire organization.
Awesome. You mentioned some of the elements. We got kind of the live site pulled up here. Some of the elements that came in from the design, some of the iconography that's being used here for those key areas that were identified early on. Erin, do you want to talk about any of the other things that?
Yeah, well, I think for Dale, I know working with Dale and Brian, who designed the site on our side, I think there were a lot of really great ideas that came out of just Dale's research and his excitement about trying new things. So if you go to the top, we have this hamburger menu, which we typically see in mobile, but with Owensboro's growing mobile audience, which we were seeing by quite a bit over the last 5 years, we felt like this would be a great move. And I think, Dale, this was really something you were inspired with too, was the mobile menu, to bring this into play, because we do know that their audience was becoming more mobile friendly, using their devices more and more. We were seeing a huge shift in desktop usage going down in comparison with mobile. And so I think bringing that what we call that hamburger menu in to play is an interesting experiment, because I think we're finding people are getting more familiar with that. They're not as needy with needing to have every navigation item in front of them, and so these kind of bigger expanse graphics, obviously we have this beautiful video header. It plays really well. It says a lot about their brand, but we're seeing a younger generation that's getting more apt to mobile. So having these menus kind of out of the way to make room for that brand message is I think, a really interesting approach. And I think we're seeing a lot of great feedback from that.
Cool. You can pull up another page here as well.
So this is the heart care section, and heart and vascular was one section that was important for Dale and his organization, and he can talk to this as well, for the content to be reworked. So this was one section of content that we worked on with him to rewrite and redevelop and just structure in a little bit more friendly way and provide, kind of shrink some of those pages down, make them easier to read and access. So a lot of really great use of bold headings, a lot of great use of calls to action, really driving people to stay engaged with that content. And, it's colorful and fun to look at too. It's really not a bland design, and so it really engages the user on a content and a design level. Cool.
Yeah, Erin, you've mentioned some of the pieces of the project that tend to get forgotten in the design phase, and I know you see this working on the team that you do. Mm-hmm. What are some of those areas that you often see get maybe neglected, or they're, at the end of the project?
It's a great question. I think part of it is that we have here third-party integration, I think, is one of them. So we work really closely with third parties. So this could be things like your career or your job portal. It could be physician ratings. You could have appointment requests or urgent care check-ins. Anything that you have that's a functionality or some kind of tool on your site that you use third party, we like to really get that relationship started early, because we want to make sure that those pieces of your current site are integrated in your redesign, and we don't want to leave those behind. Usually those functionalities are really important to that user experience, so we don't want to make them a phase 2 item post-launch. We really want to make sure that they're there for the day of launch. And so I think integrating those third-party elements are great. Health libraries, too, we really like to talk about health libraries because, as I mentioned earlier, you don't want to have a lot of content on the site that you're trying to use to answer people's questions. You're not trying to answer every question your patient has. And health libraries can be a great weight to help kind of work that content in and cross-link to library content. It stays updated on its own. You don't have to do a whole lot with it. And it's just one less piece of content you have to maintain as a team or as an individual on the web team to try to keep updated all the time. So health libraries are another great thing, a great relationship and a great conversation to start early if you're going that direction.
Sure. So at this point, we've got design work going on. We've got content work going on, big project. For a lot of folks, they've got their current website up and going as well. Project management becomes a pretty important piece of the puzzle. And how do you see that playing out? What advice do you give clients around that?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. So it's really hard. That is a lot of balls in the air, right? It's a lot to juggle if you're, especially if you're a one-person team or if you're working in a smaller group. So you really want to think about setting a few deadlines for yourself. And so we like to talk to clients about starting to, maybe put a stop point on adding content to the old site, because now it's just kind of we know it's going away. So we don't want to keep updating it. So instead of doing content on the old site, the content that people are coming to you with to add, start maybe finding a home for that in the new site as you're working toward that launch date. Maybe stop accepting content changes from departments. So someone might come in and say, well, I've got to rewrite this whole section on this test or diagnosis that we offer. That's great. We're happy to do it, but maybe let's start doing it on the new site and start retiring the old site so we're not putting a lot of eggs in that basket. And then, of course, stop agonizing over the wish list. That's a big one. You have so many goals with a redesign and a launch, and we really, as vendors, we really want to support you in those goals, but we also need to make sure that we're choosing a list of need lists over wish lists. So thinking about what are those target audiences, what do they really need on that first day of launch? What functionality do we know needs to exist for that first day? And anything that's not for that target audience, or anything that maybe some stakeholder just says, this would be nice to have, a nice to have can go on a wish list for a later phase. So start prioritizing future phases after launch, and that's where some of those can start working in the future.
Yeah, Dale, what kind of things ended up on your phase 2 wish list out of the project?
One of the big things was content, and what I mean by that is things that are going on within the organization, so news events. I think we may have had 10 press releases put on the website in 2015. We've got over 50 already for this year. And so really just having as much fresh content that will interact with Google to help us with our Google rankings. That, of course, then moves into SEO. So when I was interviewing for the position, the only thing that I could find on Owensboro Health on the first page of Google was jobs. And it's, a hospital and medical. So we've worked with Geometric to get our service lines on that first page of Google the right way, organically. We're not paying for pay-per-click. And so really making sure that our audience can find us when they're looking for heart care, when they're looking for cancer care. And then also, too, something that I'm really excited about now is integrating our social pages into the website itself. So now when you go to look at stories, you've got the option to like it, tweet it, LinkedIn it, however you want to say that, but really share it. Really share it and get the word of Owensboro Health out there to those social networks and let the user kind of do the work for us about the things that they like and, tell their friends.
Yeah, so speaking of SEO as kind of a motivator as well, you mentioned, getting that fresh content out there, getting the social pieces going on to help boost SEO. What was your thought process behind, PPC versus SEO and why that was becoming a focus as you were working on the new site?
Well, as part of my previous job, in sales for digital, one of the things that I sold was SEO. And so I understood off the bat the differences between pay-per-click and, organic. Pay-per-click is great to get you there, but when your budget runs out, you're back to square one. And so, money is not always an option for a lot of people, so we want to do it right the first time. So really getting the content updated and correct was part one, but part two was taking that content and then making it search engine friendly. So, some of our content that we've rewritten is now being revised to reflect what Google calls their friends or those terms. So really, we've done leaps and bounds. We've been in it for, I want to say, about 90 days, which is about the time that things really start to click with Google when you start making changes like this and do it correctly. And when you Google Owensboro Health now, our About Us and our services pop up. And jobs is still right there, third or fourth, but, as an organization, we appear first. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a big piece to consider in a project like this when even if you're staying on the same platform, moving platforms, whatever, a lot of times there's big changes going on as part of the redesign and thinking about that long-term strategy so you're not paying over and over again for PPC costs ad costs when you could just be kind of earning that. Aaron, how do you see that playing out? Owensboro is maybe a more straightforward example of some of the ones I know you've seen.
Mm-hmm. So what's really great about SEO is it's really easy with analytics to do some benchmarking. And so this is an example of Owensboro. Dale, your team put this together, it looked like probably for stakeholders to kind of give them a high-level view of here's where we're at for page views today, here's where we're at for mobile traffic today, and just kind of give them benchmarks. And those are just kind of, high level. You don't really have to have anything too direct. For some of your service lines, you might want to get a little bit more nitty-gritty with it, but having some of those benchmarkings are really great. Thinking about different elements of your benchmarking might include, rankings, current listings, links, outbound links, things like that. Google Analytics can tell you a lot of great stories about how your users are engaging with content, and understanding that traffic and where it's at today gives you some things to look forward to. And of course, you always want to remember that you might see some dips after a new launch, especially as pages that are now no longer in existence start to get archived in Google and new pages start to get found by Google. You're going to see some fluctuations. So thinking about rankings, your traffic, and your links as a good way to benchmark some of that planning for your site launch.
That's awesome. I know we've got a set of recommendations that we provide to clients, and I think we've got a version of that that we put together to share as well. So in that survey at the end of the webinar, you can indicate if you want those SEO launch recommendations, and we'll send that out to you as well. There's just a number of things, kind of a checklist to consider as you're thinking about, keeping track of pages, monitoring them, and planning for that redesign. So finally, we get to the end of this process. We've got everything together. We're ready to launch. Dale, you went through a whole series of steps, launching to different audiences and doing some soft launches. What did that look like, and what was some of the thought process behind that?
Sure. Our launch process was not nearly as long as the research process. Once we had things where we were comfortable to release them, we did a release to administration to let them go through it. And then we did a 2-week release with the managers and directors. This was prefaced by a presentation of the website where I introduced it to leadership and really walked through element by element why the website was designed the way it was. Followed up with a link for them to take the time to look over their departments and their service lines and to report any thing that needed to be fixed before we went live. Once we got all the feedback, which was very minimal, we were then into a public soft launch. And we kind of still are into a soft launch several months later. We do have a public campaign that we're going to be launching probably in the next 2 to 3 months, but we have not made a big announcement that, the website is new and refreshed yet. So we're still waiting to take that vow publicly, but we're out there.
Yeah, it's kind of an ongoing process of rolling things out. Were you at any point, once you start to open things up to that soft launch, you start to get feedback internally, did you ever feel overwhelmed with feedback, and how did you kind of manage that process?
No, we really didn't. I set up, I used Form Builder, and I created a survey that if the managers and directors saw something that needed to be fixed, instead of me getting 20 emails in a day and trying to follow up on 20 emails, I had it all funneled to that one spreadsheet, and as they came in, I was able to make the corrections and then follow up via email to them to let them know that it was fixed. But then again, too, I didn't have 20 emails a day telling me that something was, wrong with it. So really just giving them an option to express their concerns, and also to let them rate the website and see, if they thought it was excellent or if they thought they needed it work, and we got a lot of excellence. So. Yeah.
You really took a process, I think, of, going top down, getting buy-in several times through the process and communicating it that way as well. And you guys, I know, you really went above and beyond, I guess, with your internal communication. Tell us a little bit about the scavenger hunt project that you did.
Sure. We did do a soft launch with the employees, and at the same time we were doing the redesign of the website, we launched our mobile app as well. And so we came up with a campaign called Agents of Technology, and we sent out an email to the entire organization saying that, they would have a chance to win an Apple Watch if they became an agent of technology. And what that was is they had to go on our website and also download our mobile app and answer 5 questions on the website and 5 questions on the mobile app. And if they got both right, they had 2 chances to win the Apple Watch Sport. So it was a lot of fun. We did it for 2 weeks. We had over, I want to say, 1,200 folks that engaged with it. And it was just phenomenal to see how many people got excited about the new website and the new mobile app. And the emails that I got about, it was the coolest thing to do this, scavenger hunt. It was just exciting, and it was a way to top off, a job well done. It was gratifying, if you will, that they had fun with it and they were excited about it. And we actually had fun with videos, and when we presented it to the winner, we kind of made a big deal out of it and sent it out. So it was a good time.
Oh, that's great. That's such a good way to get your group involved, but also recognizing that, those 1,200 employees are great ambassadors for your organization out in the community, and getting that visibility starting to spread out. Aaron, what other things do you see clients doing as part of launch?
So I think Dale's example is great. That was a pretty unique one for starters. I think that's a really fun way to get people involved. But externally, when you're thinking about the public and those target audiences you're trying to bring in, this is an example of a client we launched in early 2015. They went online and showed a picture with their new website and their excited web team talking about their new website and how much functionality it's going to bring in and how much better user experiences their fans can expect. So sharing it on social is a great way. You know, your social fans are also your brand ambassadors. They're following you because they care about your content. So tell them about your new mobile-friendly website. Link them to pages of content or events or blogs or physicians that you're trying to promote. You know, mention your new website and its functionality in newsletters and email marketing too. You know, people are engaging with email. Email is hugely on the rise. So, you know, make a point to put that in an upcoming newsletter or email marketing, and always be sure to advertise with traditional media if you can. So, you know, a lot of the same stuff we all know how to do, but thinking about the launch is really a big deal internally, but it's really important to your users as well. So letting them know that your site is now mobile friendly is also a great way to kind of see that mobile traffic go up pretty quickly.
Definitely. So kind of some concluding thoughts. Dale, just wanted to start with you. What, you know, if you had to sum up the project, you know, what are some of the things that you learned through it, and any kind of thoughts or tips that you have to share out of it?
Yeah, it's just always ask questions. You know, I was very new to this process, and so, you know, don't be afraid to, if you don't understand something. I know when I got Aaron's content matrix, I was just overwhelmed, like, what is this? You know, and so really just ask the questions of, you know, okay, this is great, you've given me this, but what do I do with it? And so, you know, it was a positive experience all the way through. I would just say allow yourself plenty of time for approval. You know, don't take things personally on feedback. Just, you know, try to analyze it and figure out what's the best way to move forward with it, and get excited about it. It's fun times, and, you know, once you get something, a shiny new toy out there to play with, to see how people are playing with it with Google Analytics, it's just fun. So just really sit back, enjoy the ride, and, you know, let Genetric help you all the way, which is what I did, and it was a very rewarding experience.
You make it sound so fun.
Well, it was. I enjoyed it. I really did.
Yeah.
Still enjoying it.
That's nice. Aaron, what kind of are your top tips or big takeaways?
Well, I think with Dale's example of being with Owensboro and all the processes and approvals that they went through, and really kind of rallying their folks on their side to make sure they understood the breadth of the project and what the scope was and what the expectations would be, I think that's a really important takeaway. And we really appreciate being there and supporting clients, of course, along the way, providing any materials we can to help with some of those conversations, and even those difficult conversations you might have to have regarding content and paring some things down. But I think really having those approvals lined up, knowing your team, what you're responsible for, and like Dale said, ask questions and speak up. You know, if something stumps you along the way, talk to your vendor, talk to whoever your account manager, whomever you're working with, and make sure they answer those questions for you, because that's really the only way we're going to know that we need to take a step back and reevaluate and make sure we're in the right place together. And really that communication is so key with a project of this size, because you really want to make sure you stay on the same page, and there's no way to do that but to be honest with each other and be open. And so it really is a partnership, and it's not just a hired relationship. It's really a partnership, and it's a very strategic partnership.
That's great. So that kind of sums it up. We're going to open the floor for some questions. We're going to do some Q&A now. And we'll try to take as many as we can in the time that we have remaining. So go ahead and post those questions into the Q&A box on your screen. And if we don't get to your question today, if we run out of time, we'll definitely be following up after we're done today.